Ghana gained independence from Britain on 6 March 1957. At that time, most countries in Africa were still under colonial rule. Ghana was thus a source of inspiration for other countries across Africa who also desired earnestly to be independent. Independent Ghana was led by indigenous civilian leaders. Many may have thought that the country will continue to be led further by civilian leaders, but this was not to be. Few years after independence, the country witnessed its first military coup, and from then on, the country experienced other coups in quick succession till the country eventually returned to democracy in 1993. In this edition of Back in History, our mission is to bring to your viewing pleasure the story of all the military coups that had taken place in the Republic of Ghana in West Africa. Welcome to this edition of Back in History. The first military coup in Ghana was executed on 24th February 1966. This was the coup that removed Dr. Kwame Nkrumah from office. Kwame Nkrumah was arguably the most famous African leader in his time. He was so popular across Africa and across other continents of the world. He was a well-educated African who had received formal education at home and abroad. He had classmates across the world and found it easy to interact with the creme de la creme of world politics. Owing to his popularity and the respect he had across board, Kwame Nkrumah was often invited to attend important meetings and gatherings around the world. The Vietnam War had raged on for long with casualties on both sides, and the president of North Vietnam at the time, President Ho Chi Minh, thought it wise to invite Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, a well-respected African leader, to come to Hanoi and assist him in resolving the issues that resulted in the war. Kwame Nkrumah agreed and left Ghana with some of his cabinet members to Hanoi. It was while he was in Hanoi that a coup was executed against him at home in Ghana. Nkrumah was effectively overthrown and warned not to return home. The coup was led by Emmanuel Kotoka, who was a colonel at the time, Kwasi Afrifa, who was a major, the Inspector General of Police by name J.W.K. Halley, and a few others. Some reports have said that Lieutenant General Joseph Nkrumah was part of the coup plot, while other sources say that he was only brought in to lead the new regime. Note that at the time of the coup in February 1966, Nkrumah had already left the military, having been compulsorily retired in July 1965 by the government of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah on suspicion of involvement in a coup plot. Following the March 1966 coup, President Kwame Nkrumah was effectively removed from office and a new government was formed, with Lieutenant General Joseph Nkrumah assuming the seat of power as military head of state of Ghana. The new government constituted what was known as the National Liberation Council, which was the highest decision-making body in the country. It composed of 4 army officers and 4 police officers. It appointed a cabinet of civil servants and promised to restore democratic governance as quickly as possible. General Nkrumah, however, remained in office from February 1966 to 1969 when he was forced to resign from office over a bribery scandal involving him and a Nigerian businessman, Arthur Nzeribe. The second military leader of Ghana was Kwasi Afrifa, who stepped into the office of head of state following the resignation of Joseph Nkrumah. Afrifa was a key member of the National Liberation Council. He was one of the persons that executed the first military coup along with Emmanuel Kotoka and others. As a matter of fact, it was Afrifa that announced to the country and to the world at the broadcasting house that Kwame Nkrumah's government had been overthrown. He received rapid promotion in the military from the rank of major to lieutenant general within 3 years in the government of Joseph Nkrumah. He also served as the Minister of Finance and Trade. Afrifa did not stay in office for long as military head of state. He was succeeded by Niyama Olenu, who was in office for 24 days only as acting president of Ghana from 7th August 1970 to 31st August 1970. Olenu was succeeded by Edward Akufo-Addo on 31st August 1970. Edward Akufo-Addo was in office till 13th January 1972, a total of 1 year, 135 days. Edward Akufo-Addo was the father of President Nana Akufo-Addo. During the tenures of Olenu and Akufo-Addo as presidents, Dr. Kofi Bousia served as Prime Minister of the country. It was while Edward Akufo-Addo was serving as president of the country that the military struck again in Ghana. This time, the coup was led by Ignatius Acheampong, who was a colonel at the time. Acheampong and his men struck and removed Akufo-Addo from office on 13th January 1972. It was on a Thursday. The constitution was suspended with immediate effect. The Parliament of Ghana was also suspended and all political parties were banned. Every other element of democratic governance was also suspended with immediate effect. The Prime Minister, Dr. Kofi Bousia, was also removed from office. In essence, Ghana was effectively returned to full military rule and dictatorship. Acheampong was quickly promoted to the rank of general. He went on to govern the country and made a number of changes. For instance, he was the one who changed from left-hand driving to right-hand driving in Ghana, and same has been in place till date. He carried out other reforms in the country. He was applauded by many and also criticized in a number of ways by others. Acheampong promised to see to the conduct of election and handover of power to a democratically elected president, but he kept shifting the post. He remained in office for a total of 6 years, 173 days. He had a fairly long stay in office. The person who served as deputy head of state was Fred Akufo. Fred received promotion to the rank of lieutenant general. Acheampong and Fred governed Ghana together until 5th July 1978, when Acheampong was removed in a palace coup by his deputy, Fred Akufo. Some reports have stated that Acheampong was forced to resign from office by members of the Supreme Military Council, of which Fred was a leading member. Other reports have stated that he was outrightly removed in a palace coup from office by Fred Akufo and his men. Fred Akufo was in office from 5th July 1978 when Acheampong was removed, and stayed on till 4th June 1979 when he was deposed in yet another military coup. The story has it that while Lieutenant General Fred Akufo was in office as president, there was a mutiny by some army officers led by Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings. This happened at the military barracks. Jerry and his colleagues had complained of massive corruption against the military leaders of the country, and thus decided to register their dissatisfaction by the mutiny. Some analysts have said that it was not just a mutiny but a move to seize power from General Fred Akufo. But unfortunately for Jerry and his colleagues, the plan leaked and was crushed by loyal troops, and Jerry Rawlings was arrested and detained along with his colleagues. General Fred Akufo then set up a military court-martial to try Jerry Rawlings and others for treason. Fred wanted the people of Ghana to follow proceedings at the trial and to witness how fair the trial would be. He may have thought that he would garner support for his government if the people of Ghana were given the opportunity to follow the proceedings at the military court-martial. The proceedings of the military court-martial was therefore broadcast live on TV and on radio. Ghanaians and people from around the world watched the proceedings and heard the testimonies of the arrested soldiers directly. It turned out that General Fred Akufo had made a serious mistake in allowing the trial to be broadcast live. When Jerry Rawlings mounted the stand to testify in his defense, he dazzled the tribunal and the viewing public with his oratory. He spoke the minds of many people in Ghana. He stated that there was too much corruption in the country, that as a military pilot who had the privilege of driving the high and mighty of Ghana to several places, he had seen how Ghana's resources were plundered, that the military leaders were sinking the country every day, and that there is too much hardship in the country. He then said that the attempt by his group to remove President Fred Akufo from office was justified and that the tribunal should not mete out any punishment against them. There was indeed high cost of living and general hardship in the country, and the testimony of Jerry Rawlings resonated loudly with many people. Those that watched from home hailed Rawlings for his courageous presentation at the tribunal. Though the soldiers in the country could not speak out, most of them were in support of Rawlings. For many people, Rawlings said nothing but the truth. At this point, General Fred Akufo must have regretted allowing the trial to be aired live. But there was nothing he could do. The trial had already been aired live, and everybody had listened and watched the proceedings. The tribunal later adjourned its sitting to the following day, and Jerry and others were taken back to the cell. While in the cell waiting for their trial to continue at daybreak, some junior officers who were mandated to guard the cell broke the cell and brought out Jerry Rawlings and others, and from there, Jerry and the soldiers marched to the residence of President Fred Akufo and executed a coup against him. He was removed from office and Jerry Rawlings was enthroned as the new military head of state of Ghana. His emergence was described by many as dramatic and unbelievable. Fred Akufo was shocked, so were members of the military tribunal. The emergence as president of a man that was tried just a day before marked the end of the sitting of the military tribunal. The chairman and members of the tribunal could only run for their dear lives. The table had turned 360 degrees. The first thing that Jerry Rawlings did was to consolidate his hold on power and take full charge of the country. The next thing he did was to cause the arrest of General Fred Akufo and other top military officers in his government. He also caused the arrest of former heads of state of Ghana. A military court-martial was set up against them to try them for corruption. In the end, 3 former heads of state were sentenced to death by firing squad. They were lined up at the Teshi military range and shot. Their bodies were not released to family members for burial. The bodies were interred at the Nsawan prison cemetery on the directive of the military government of Jerry Rawlings. It took the request of the widows of the executed heads of state to President John Kufuor to allow the exhumation of the bodies of the slain generals for proper burial in their respective homes. President John Kufuor granted the request in 2002 in the spirit of national healing and reconciliation, and their remains were exhumed and taken to their respective homes for proper burial. The 3 former heads of state were General Fred Akufo, the man whom Rawlings succeeded, General Ignatius Acheampong, and General Kwasi Afrifa. 5 other senior military officers were also executed at about the same time. Rawlings took charge but stayed for a short while. He was in office from 4th June 1979 till 24th September 1979, a period of only 112 days. During this time, he saw to the conduct of democratic election, which led to the birth of Ghana's Third Republic. The person who emerged from the election as president was President Hilal Liman of the PNP. Hilal Liman took office on 24th September 1979 and remained in office till when another military coup was executed in Ghana. Interestingly, that military coup was planned and executed by the same man who handed over power to Liman Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings. He moved in with his men and removed President Liman from office on the 31st day of December 1981. Ghana again returned to full military rule and dictatorship. Rawlings stayed in office as military head of state on his second coming from 1981 to 1993. There was the growing agitation for return to civilian rule, and Rawlings then lifted the ban on politics and gave approval for the conduct of democratic elections. At this time, Rawlings had already spent 12 years in office as military head of state. Forms were sold by political parties and primaries were held for the nomination of candidates for the general election. Rawlings, as sitting head of state, was interested in the election and thus purchased the form for the office of president under the umbrella of the NDC. Elections held and Rawlings won, and on 7th January 1993, he was sworn in as civilian president of Ghana. He was in office for the first 4 years and another 4 years, making it a total of 8 years as civilian president and 12 years as military head of state. Altogether, Rawlings was in the number 1 office in Ghana for 20 years. After the coup, which was executed by Rawlings in 1981, Ghana has not witnessed any other military coup till date. At the time of the making of this video, Ghana has been governed by democratically elected presidents since 1993 till date, a total of 31 unbroken years of democracy. The Republic of Ghana had indeed witnessed too many military coups, almost in quick successions, until the country had the fortune of restoration of democracy in 1993, which has endured till today. Thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel or follow the page for regular notification on every new video. I am your friend and host Acheampong, wishing you the best of time as you continue to walk with me across the corridors of history in our determination to document and preserve the history of Africa.